afternoon. I'm Bob Irwin. Welcome to this urgent gun rights news bulletin to inform gun owners in California and Nevada of some critical votes in the House of Representatives in the next several weeks. First, on September 4th, 2019, the House Judiciary Committee will set a vote on an assault weapons ban. Gun law expert Donald J. Green will address important points to you in the next few minutes. Second, all Nevadans in California authorized by law to possess firearms, and for that, they are authorized to possess firearms. And for anyone else within earshot of this broadcast needs to understand the definite House and potential Senate votes that are designed specifically to undermine, if not eliminate, the only property right that's actually mentioned in the United States Constitution. That is the right to keep and bear arms. Nevadans in particular need not immediately fear the weapons ban unless the governor calls for a special session of the Nevada legislature. In Nevada, we have a specific constitutional right to bear arms, so long as you are not prohibited from possessing firearms. As Mr. Green will explain, the proposed assault rifle ban is so comprehensive, it is so widely ranging in the wording that it practically includes about every type of weapon which accepts a magazine. Mr. Green will now explain that this call to action is a call to legal action in the exercise of the right of the people to possess and petition the government for the redress of grievances and the right to peaceably assemble guaranteed by the United States Constitution. There's a lot going on, Mr. Green.
Yes. Bob, and all people in California and Nevada, next week, the United States House of Representatives Judiciary Committee, which has been moved by events in the recent past, is set to vote, because the Democrats run this committee, they're set to vote on a comprehensive assault weapon ban. Now, a lot of people are picking out points in this ban, and they're not really paying attention, because this assault weapons ban was actually put into vote, or actually proposed on February 15th of 2019, some 8 months ago. Now, the purpose of this, if we can focus in on this, the purpose of this bill is to regulate assault weapons, and by its very language, to ensure that the right to keep and bear arms is not unlimited. Let me repeat that. To ensure that the right to keep and bear arms is not unlimited. Now, they're using almost a double negative. They could have said it's not unlimited, which means we can, we want to make sure that you can have some, but they make the double negative and put not unlimited and for other purposes. Now, if we could still go back to that first slide, please. This bill is 127 pages long. Over 95% of this bill are definitions and the listing of firearms which are prohibited and which are not prohibited by this act. Many of these rifles, which are banned, are almost all of the common types of assault, of semi-automatic rifles, which you see, including, the Ruger 22 semi-auto. And then they've almost gone through the Gun Digest, or the Guns of America Bible, and gone through in alphabetical order, and have gone through hundreds and hundreds of different types of weapons. And they've excluded some of them, such as the Henry repeater, like a 30-06, Winchester, like the model 1876 in 4570, but the more current models, most deer hunting rifles, many bolt-action rifles which contain magazines, but the magazines currently are at 5 or 10 rounds. If we could look at the next slide, please. Now, notice that date on H.R. 8. Now, A lot of people are saying, oh, it's House of Representatives. No, it's not. Look at it very carefully, and you'll see that it's in the Senate of the United States. And although it bears a House Resolution number 8, and this was first proposed on February 28th of 2019 and read into the record on March 4th of 2019, again, predating the incidents at Gilroy, El Paso, and Dayton. But that date is very important because it's March 4th, 2019, and this act is a parallel act in the Senate proposed by Senate Republicans for a background check. Now, if we could go to the next slide, please. Now, H.R. 1296, this is what your viewers and your listeners have to focus on. This contains a background check provision. It also contains a grandfather clause for pre-banned weapons. It will require a separate background check through a federal firearms dealer. If you have a pre-banned firearm and you want to sell it, you have to take it to a federal firearms licensee. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, this is the first step towards gun registration. Well, if anybody looks at pages 2, 3, and 4 of the current form ATF 4473, you'll see that in every single 4473, which is submitted to a particular point of sale, from the point of sale to like the state of Nevada up in Carson City when there's a gun show, you'll see that it has the make, the model, the caliber, the serial number of the weapon. So people can't tell me that there's no gun registration, which we already have. We do, in fact, have a form of gun registration. Can we go back to that slide, please? Here's a very important point. The federal firearms licensees are now going to be like these brown shirts for Nazis, and they must notify law enforcement of an attempted purchase by a prohibited person. Now, right now, that's not being so much enforced unless there's multiple times where you try to go to a gun show. Because when you go to the gun show, and they say that, Mr. Jones, you are hereby denied a firearm right then and there, no waiting period, then they're probably not going to report you. But under the current formulation, they will have to report you. Now, they've also included in there, they've snuck in a buyback program. And this is something which has been touted by presidential candidates for the Democrats for weeks now, if not months. But they've snuck it in there, and it's at the end of this 127-page act. And you know what? It took like 5 or 6 hours for multiple people to read this into the record in the House of Representatives. It only took a few minutes for the Senate version. But if you look at that, it's got a buyback program. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now, again, the U.S. House of Representatives proposed assault weapons ban. Very importantly, predates Gilroy, El Paso, and Dayton. But if you listen to the mainstream media, it's as if they have just created this law. Well, they haven't. The law was in place before these events occurred. And what they've done is they're saying, quote, we created a law, so go create a crime. That's essentially what's the net result of this legislation or proposed legislation. Next slide, please. Now, I don't hear a lot about what this next slide shows. And for your listeners, it says that 34 children have died in hot cars this year alone. Now, I don't hear of anyone calling for the banning of cars of single parents or parents with young children. I don't see them calling for the banning of cars or for the special licensing of these people. And where's the public outrage for these young kids who are literally being cooked to death and between temperatures of 126 degrees and 141 degrees. And 34 children have died this year, more children than in Dayton, more children than in El Paso, and more children, more people than in Gilroy. And these are entirely preventable deaths, but yet you don't hear the clamor. You don't hear anyone saying we should ban these cars or ban the cars from any single parents unless they've got what special licensing like they want to do with cars. And in fact, the Weather Channel even now has a scorching car scale to tell you how hot it's going to be in the car given ambient temperatures and given average temperatures in certain locations throughout the United States. Now, next slide, please. Here's what we have to do. We have to vote for your Nevada rights to possess firearms, which is guaranteed by Nevada statute so long as you are able to possess a firearm. And we also have a specific provision in the Nevada Constitution. And on January 1st, 2020, in the new background check law, in the preamble to that law, it says that we in Nevada have the right to bear arms. You don't see that in California. And we must vote, if you're in California, we must vote for the continued opportunity to possess firearms in California, because California has no equivalent provision in its constitution for the keeping and the bearing of firearms. Never has, probably never will. And third, you must vote for your continued Second Amendment rights, because what is happening here, if we look at here, down in this slide, we have the House of Representatives and the Senate run by Democrats, or excuse me, the Democrats in the Senate. We have them trying to amend the Second Amendment by legislative fiat and by coup in direct violation of the processes espoused in the United States Constitution for over 200 years. And they're saying it very, very openly that you will not have an unlimited right to possess firearms, because we're going to change that. Thank you. And Bob, you had some comments on some very recent developments from today.
Well, we've had this background check push in Nevada now. The California legislature, the California governor apparently has asked the Nevada legislature to enact laws similar to what laws they have. So we've been worried about Californians coming over here and now voting as if they were living in California. Now their governor has actually asked Nevada to change its laws to match California. Where they're going is with background checks. And background checks, I can tell you this in my experience as a gun dealer here for 45 years, background checks are absolutely worthless. If we're trying to prevent crime, trying to prevent mass shootings, trying to prevent people who aren't supposed to have firearms because they have criminal histories or are mentally ill, the reality is, in background checks, when I was running a retail shop, the real numbers are 5% of the background checks come back as delayed or denied. That is, 5% of the customers, 5 out of 100, came back not initially approved. After they go through their dressing down of, well, we got to look at the place of birth, the date of birth was dyslexia, this is a guy with the same name, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't believe what I'm saying, check out all the Don Greens you can find in the phone books across the United States.
Thank you.
Or the Robert Irwins, for that matter. We talked about that on a recent Fired Up. So we have 5% decline. When they get through with all of their, we got to check this and check that and go into the guy's background and who he is, less than 0.5% are actually declined. They actually were people prohibited from having firearms, or they probably just gave up because they wanted them to send fingerprint cards to Carson City and so on. But what I'm telling you is the number of criminals that are stopped from buying firearms in this are essentially zero. When they are declined at a gun shop, they don't go to the next gun shop and ask again, because if they do, the current system, the ATF, it requires gun dealers to keep copies of their declines in a folder. What Don's talking about is now they'll mail those in, their declines. Right now they're just kept in a folder, and every couple of months the ATF comes by and makes copies of all those or takes them, and they have a database where they find a guy who was declined at my shop. So I went down the road a week later to another gun shop and tried to buy a gun, and he's declined again. What happens to those guys is they're indicted and arrested because they already knew they were prohibited. They'll give them the one, okay, you didn't know you had a traffic warrant from 37 years ago in Detroit, and you're technically a fugitive, which is a lot of the declines. So you didn't know, but now you went to one shop and they told you, yeah, you're declined, and you go to another one and try and buy a gun again when you know you are prohibited. Instead of getting a lawyer and fighting it and getting that changed, you simply try to buy a gun somewhere else, and you end up getting arrested, and they go to jail over that. So the effect on criminals, real criminals, is essentially nothing. They don't buy their guns from gun dealers. If they do, they get stopped the first time, and they're not the really stupid ones that go to another dealer. They buy them from some criminal friend of theirs or some associate or some private party who's too stupid to do a background check or realize he needs one. And they use those guns in crimes. And where these guns are coming from is almost 70% are home burglaries where people break into houses and steal guns. So the effect that this law will have on criminals getting guns, and especially on mass shootings, which are a minuscule part of all murders, just a tiny fraction of a fraction. I think Don talked about that last week. We had, so many mass shootings, and we had 4,500 people shot in Chicago over the period of 6 months or 7 months.
Well, it was several years, but still, there were more people shot in Chicago in the month of July, shot and killed, than there were in the entire shootings in Gilroy, El Paso, and Dayton combined.
Yeah.
I didn't hear the clamor there.
We're putting in laws, they're trying to put in laws that will be a complete waste of your time and money, your time and the government's money, which is taxpayer money, that could be directed at many other things where we need to spend money on in our government. So I have to tell you, as an experienced person in the gun business, this is an absolute waste of time. The background checks, and by the same token, we have the same exact program happening in the system where we're going to do, the police call and say, well, we're going to this house because his neighbor said that he might be crazy and he might have a gun, or his ex-wife said, or whatever and whatever. Those can all be fixed if we have an immediate adjudication program where when someone is charged with a crime or they're denied a firearm, that immediately they and their attorney can have a face-to-face or a telephonic contact with the judge that issued that stay that said he can't have firearms, issued that temporary court order, explaining his side. In America, we have judicial intervention where they listen to both sides. And you might go to that courtroom with your attorney or do a telephonic with your attorney and that judge and say, that's not true. I didn't ever know this person. I never beat my ex-wife. The witness she's talking about is her current boyfriend, et cetera, et cetera. So the judge hears both sides and they have opportunity to reverse that court order that says you can't have a gun or can't buy a gun. In the United States of America, under the Constitution, we listen to both sides before we take somebody's property. That's the issue here, and that has got to be added to any of these things that Trump is talking about, so we have judicial intervention. There are people who shouldn't have guns, who are mentally ill, who are crazy, who are suicidal, but it has to be a judge and interviewing the guy and his attorney to listen to both sides before we seize his property or destroy his life. That's my opinion.
Bob, I want to leave your viewers and your listeners with a fact directly from the HR 1296 on page 50 of the Act. They have exempted a number of rifles, but I thought this one was pretty telling. Exempted from the assault weapon ban is the copy of the Model 1874 Deluxe Sharps rifle. That is the rifle which you have the lever, you put the cartridge in, you pull it out. That is the same rifle used by the 2nd Battalion of the 7th Cavalry at Little Bighorn on the weekend, or excuse me, the week of July 4th, 1876. And we all know what happened then. And the Indians who had the repeaters like the Winchesters, well, we all know what happened. But I wanted everybody to know that even under this, you can go out and buy your Sharps, get the ammo, shoot the 4 or 5 cartridges, because you got to keep putting them back in as the bad guys are shooting up your house with assault rifles. Thank you.
And the last word is the way you prevent this, folks, of happening is you vote. We used to, on my show, Fired Up with Bob Irwin, we used to talk about vote for this guy and that guy because this guy's pro-gun, this guy's anti-gun. It's easier now. The Democrats are lined up in a row to take your guns away. The Republicans are pretty much lined up in a row to let you keep your constitutional right to keep and bear arms. On my show, we will look at some individual races upcoming, but if you don't get out and vote, you are part of the problem. You are not working for the solution by sitting home and bitching about the way things are going. Get out and vote. That's all I have for today.
Okay. Thank you again. Thank you to your listeners and your viewers.
Have a good afternoon.